The valley was a prison of stone, its jagged walls stretched upward, closing in like the jaws of a predator. Dust clung to the air, thick with the metallic bite of gunfire. The SEAL team pressed themselves into shallow depressions in the earth, their bodies tense, their rifles clutched tight, while the enemy's bullets screamed in from 3 different angles. The sharp crack, crack, crack of automatic fire echoed off the canyon walls, turning every sound into chaos. Gravel spat upward where rounds struck inches away from their helmets. The smell of cordite and hot rock mingled with the faint odor of sweat and fear. "Base, this is Neptune 7. We're pinned down," a voice barked over the radio. Desperation threaded through the words. "They're all over us. Multiple hostiles, 3 positions. This was a setup." The reply came through a moment later, distorted by static. "Air support inbound. ETA, 8 minutes. Hold your position." 8 minutes. The men glanced at one another, unspoken dread clear in their eyes. 8 minutes was an eternity when death rained down from above. One SEAL cursed under his breath. 8 minutes? We won't last 2. A fresh volley of rounds tore through the shale above them, showering them with shards of rock. The enemy knew exactly where they were, hemming them in like prey in a cage. Every attempt to move was cut down before it began. And then, a single, clean crack echoed across the valley. Not the stuttering fire of machine guns, but the calm thunder of a sniper rifle. The sound rolled through the canyon, commanding silence for half a breath. One of the enemy guns went quiet. A man toppled from his perch, the scope's merciless judgment delivered with surgical precision. Another shot rang out, just as precise. Another hostile slumped. Lifeless. The SEALs froze. Their world of chaos shifted in an instant. Whoever it was, wherever they were hiding, this unseen marksman was dismantling the ambush, piece by piece. On the radio, a calm voice slipped through the static. Low, controlled, unshaken. "Your path is clear, gentlemen." The team scrambled to reposition, eyes searching the cliffs, but they saw nothing. No glint of glass, no shadow of a figure, no sign of where the shots had come from. The battlefield had shifted. An invisible guardian had cleared their escape before the roar of friendly aircraft could even reach the sky. No one ever saw her. No one ever found the place she had fired from. But she was there. Her name was Reina Vasquez, 28 years old, mixed European and American heritage. Long brown hair tied back in a utilitarian knot, a lean frame hardened by years of training and fieldwork, and eyes as sharp as the steel she carried, eyes that saw details most others overlooked. Officially, Reina was an auxiliary reconnaissance support specialist, attached to the forward operating base in the Batu Hills. She was not part of the SEAL unit. She was not supposed to be there in the fight, but sometimes survival didn't wait for permission. Around bases, she was known by other names: Radio Girl, Spotter, Temp. Most of the soldiers saw her as background noise, a fill-in for logistics or weather data, someone who wasn't cut for the brutal edge of combat. A young private had once laughed, "You should be in the TOC working radio ops. That's more your speed." Reina hadn't replied. She'd simply smiled faintly and gone back to cleaning her Barrett M82, every component gleaming beneath her careful hands. They didn't understand. They didn't know. On the range, when SEAL teams practiced long-distance marksmanship, she would stand quietly behind them, calculating the wind with uncanny accuracy. She offered her numbers, steady and precise. They ignored her, relied instead on their expensive rangefinders and digital gadgets. And each time, their bullets strayed, 2 inches off, sometimes more. At just 15 meters, that was enough to miss the kill zone. The sergeant overseeing the exercise had frowned once, muttering, "Somebody's got the right numbers, but nobody's listening." That somebody had been her, because Reina had learned something most modern soldiers never would. The wind was not just one thing. It was not a single stream you measured once and accounted for. It was layers: ground wind, mid-level wind, and high wind. Each one different, each one changing, each one shaping the invisible path a bullet traveled. She had learned that truth as a child, walking the open ridges of Montana beside her grandfather, a hunter, a veteran, and a man who believed the air itself spoke to those who listened. "Feel it," he had told her. squinting into the endless sky. Not with your ears, but with your skin. The way it shifts on your cheek, the way the grass leans, the way the birds ride the currents, the bullet passes through all of it. Miss just one layer, and you miss your mark. She had never forgotten. Others trusted equipment. Raina trusted instinct, patience, and the silver coin her grandfather had carried in Vietnam. A worn $50, one side smooth to featureless shine from decades of use. He had flipped it in jungles and deserts alike, watching the air catch it, reading the way it twisted and fell. This coin saved my life more than once, he had told her. Not because it's lucky, because it taught me to see what others couldn't. And so she carried it always, tucked into her shirt pocket, a tool disguised as a keepsake. Not superstition, survival. The SEALs didn't know her. The base dismissed her. But the valley knew. The wind knew. And on that day when 8 men were seconds from death, Reina Vasquez had been ready. The forward operating base in the Batu Hills woke early, as it always did. At 0500, the compound was already alive with motion. Soldiers lacing boots, helicopters growling on the tarmac, the mess hall clattering, with trays and hurried conversations. The desert air was cool, but everyone knew it wouldn't stay that way. By mid-morning, the heat would crawl down into the valley, baking the rock until it radiated like an oven. Reina Vasquez sat at the back of the briefing room, a black notebook balanced on her knee. She had slipped into the session quietly, taking her usual place near the wall, where the light from the projector only brushed her face in glancing streaks. The long table at the center was crowded with SEALs, officers, and intelligence staff. Their uniforms bore the dust of fieldwork and the weight of rank. At the head of the table, the intelligence officer tapped a laser pointer against a satellite photo projected on the wall. The image displayed a narrow valley carved between 2 ridgelines, its rocky slopes dotted with brush and scattered outcroppings. At the valley's heart sat a cluster of buildings, stone, tin, and tarpaulin. "Target compound," the officer announced crisply. "Intelligence confirms it is being used to hold a high-value hostage, an American aid worker taken during last week's raid near the border. Our objective, infiltrate, recover the hostage, and exfiltrate before insurgent reinforcements arrive." The SEALs leaned forward, studying the terrain. Some jotted notes, others sat with arms crossed, memorizing every detail. "Extraction window is tight. Enemy presence is expected to be light." The officer continued, but Reina's brows furrowed. Light, she thought. She had been studying the valley for weeks, gathering her own observations during reconnaissance patrols. The patterns of movement, the trails worn into the dust, the smoke curling from fires at odd hours. It all suggested something more. More men, more preparation. The officer clicked to another slide. Weather conditions, optimal. Light winds, clear visibility. No significant environmental factors expected to interfere with operations. Reina's grip tightened around her pencil. Wrong, she thought immediately. She had checked the valley at dawn that morning, as she always did. Standing on a high overlook, silver coin in hand, she had felt the restless shifts in the air. Thermal updrafts had begun rising from the canyon floor, twisting currents that would only worsen with the sun's heat. By mid-mission, snipers on either ridge would be fighting invisible whirlwinds. Shots could drift feet off target. She raised her hand. "Sir." The room quieted slightly. The intelligence officer paused, clearly irritated at the interruption. "Yes, Vasquez." "I've been monitoring the microclimate in that valley," she said steadily. Her voice was calm, professional but firm. "Thermal updrafts are already forming. By 0900 hours, they'll create unpredictable shear between the ridgelines. Any long-range precision fire will be compromised. If you plan sniper overwatch, you'll need alternate observation points, or recalculated. Wind adjustments." The officer's mouth twitched, halfway between annoyance and dismissal. He tapped the pointer against the map again. "Thank you, Vasquez, but headquarters meteorology has already provided their data. Conditions are favorable." Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing more. Around the table, a few SEALs cast quick glances at her, but none spoke up. Not against the flow, not against the authority in front of them. The team leader, Commander Hale, cleared his throat. "Assignments, SEAL Team 7, will lead the entry. Support elements will maintain comms. Vasquez, he turned toward her, you'll remain on base. Radio support. Radio support, again. Reyna lowered her gaze to her notebook, writing without really seeing the page. Radio girl. That's what some of them called her when they thought she couldn't hear. Always on the sidelines. Always behind the desk. Yes, sir, she answered quietly. The briefing moved on. Plans were made, routes drawn, contingencies spoken aloud. The SEALs asked sharp, tactical questions, their voices carrying confidence. The projector hummed. The map shifted from angles to infiltration routes, then to exfil options. But Reyna's thoughts were elsewhere. Back in the valley, where the wind danced unseen. She could almost feel it against her skin even now, tugging, pulling, shifting invisible paths. She thought of the silver coin in her pocket, smoothed by years of her grandfather's hands. They won't listen. They never do. Still, she prepared. She always prepared. When the briefing ended, the men filed out, their boots thudding against the concrete floor. Laughter and banter resumed, the kind of bravado soldiers use to mask nerves before a mission. Reyna lingered. She packed her notebook slowly, watching the satellite image fade to black as the projector clicked off. The room emptied until only the hum of fluorescent lights remained. She stood, slung her notebook under her arm, and walked out into the dry morning air. The sun was climbing now, spilling gold across the base. Helicopters crouched like beasts on the flight line, their rotors creaking in the breeze. Somewhere beyond those ridges lay the compound, and somewhere above it, the air was already shifting, unseen currents ready to betray anyone who didn't know how to read them. Reyna knew. She always knew. And a part of her, though she would never admit it aloud, already suspected that the mission ahead would not go as smoothly as the slides had promised. At 0800 hours, the helicopters lifted from the forward operating base, their blades chopping the morning air with the heavy rhythm of war drums. Dust rose in clouds behind them, curling into the sky as if trying to hold them back. Inside the lead bird, the SEAL team sat in silence, faces obscured by helmets and dark goggles. Weapons rested across their laps, hands gloved and steady. They didn't speak much during insertions. There was nothing left to say. Every man knew the plan. Every man knew the risk. Commander Hale glanced around at his team, giving a curt nod that carried the weight of final reassurance. They were ready. They always were. From the communications room on base, Reyna Vasquez listened to the chatter in her headset. Her job, officially, was to monitor transmissions, log movements, and coordinate air support if needed. She sat at her console, headphones snug over her ears, pen tapping lightly against her notebook. For the first hour, everything sounded routine. The teams moved according to plan, radio check-ins crisp and professional. The compound was in sight, recon confirmed enemy presence, but not overwhelming numbers. By all appearances, the briefing had been correct, but Reyna's chest felt tight. Her instincts told her otherwise. The wind was shifting again. She could hear it, even through the insulated walls of the comm center, the faint whisper that only she seemed to notice. Then the call came. Base, this is Neptune 7. Multiple hostiles. Repeat, multiple hostiles. Heavier resistance than expected. We're pinned down at grid coordinates. Gunfire erupted in the background, harsh and immediate. Reyna's pencil flew across the page, copying numbers without hesitation. She saw the location in her mind, the shape of the canyon walls, the ambush points she herself had walked past during recon. She could see it, clear as day. Insurgents dug in on high ground, suppressing fire from 3 angles, her team caught like rats in a funnel. Neptune 7, air support inbound. ETA, 8 minutes. Hold your position. Her own voice was steady into the mic, though her pulse hammered like a drum. 8 minutes. She knew it wasn't enough. Base, we can't hold 8 minutes. The reply came ragged, urgent. Gunfire drowned half the words. They've got us zeroed. Elevated fire positions. Need help now. The line crackled. More shots. Then silence, but for the echoes of battle. Reyna sat frozen, staring at the coordinates scrawled across her notebook. Her throat tightened. They'll be dead before the jets arrive. She looked up. Around her, the other operators worked their channels. Calm voices relaying updates. requesting support, transmitting reports up the chain. Their faces were composed, disciplined, following protocol. Protocol would kill the SEALs. Reyna rose from her chair. "Where are you going?" Sergeant Martinez asked, glancing up from his console. "Getting coffee," she lied smoothly. Her voice was so casual, so ordinary that Martinez nodded and returned to his work. Reyna slipped out, her heart thudding against her ribs. She didn't go to the mess hall. She went to the armory. Her Barrett M82 lay waiting in her locker, gleaming from the night's meticulous cleaning. She hefted it with reverence, the weight familiar, grounding. She added her spotting scope, rangefinder, and the small notebook she always carried. And last of all, she slid her grandfather's silver coin into her pocket. She walked quickly to the gate. The guard barely looked up as she signed the log. "Perimeter check," she wrote in neat letters. Then she was outside the wire, boots striking dirt, rifle slung across her back. The climb was brutal. The outcrop she had chosen sat nearly a mile east of base, rising like a jagged tooth above the valley floor. The path was steep, not treacherous, loose shale threatening to collapse under every step. But Reyna moved with the sure-footedness of someone raised in the mountains of Montana. Her lungs burned, her muscles screamed, but she pressed on. 18 minutes later, she reached the top. She dropped flat against the rock, chest heaving, and unfolded her rifle's bipod. Below her, the valley spread wide and cruel. Through her scope, she saw the truth. The SEALs trapped in a shallow depression, enemy fire pouring down from 3 distinct nests. Muzzle flashes flickered like cruel stars on the ridges. The men were minutes from being overrun. Reyna pulled out her silver coin. She flipped it, watching how the air caught it, how it drifted and spun before clinking onto the rock. She felt the wind against her skin, gentle at ground level, but fierce and shifting higher up. 3 layers: ground calm, mid-level, crosswind from the northwest. High altitude, currents curling back from the southeast. She scribbled calculations into her notebook. Distance, elevation, correction factors. Numbers most snipers would struggle to process in minutes. She did it in seconds. She chambered the first round. Target 1, machine gun nest, North Ridge. Range, 847 meters. Crosswind correction, 2.3 mils left. Reyna settled her breathing. In, outside. Find the pause. Hold it. Crack. The rifle thundered across the canyon. Through the scope, she watched the gunner collapse, his weapon falling silent. Radio chatter exploded. "Did you see that? Someone just dropped their heavy weapon." She ignored it. Adjusted. Target 2, sniper on the south wall. Distance, 1,240 meters. Bullet path crossed all 3 wind layers. Correction, complex. She recalculated, adjusted elevation, compensated for drift at upper trajectory. Crack. The enemy sniper fell. "Base, whoever that is out there, they just cleared our flank." Reyna's pulse raced, but her hands were steady. Target 3, blocking position at the escape route. Range, 1,340 meters. Near the rifle's effective limit. Wind shifting again. She flipped the coin, adjusted one last time. Crack. The final nest went silent. For a moment, the canyon was hushed, broken only by the SEALs' urgent movements as they seized their chance to break free. Then on the radio, a voice older, calmer, steady as stone. Master Chief Peterson. "Base," he said, his tone sharp. "Tell me someone authorized a sniper for Overwatch." Silence answered. Peterson's voice came again, quieter as if to himself. "Those shots, that technique. Phantom wind." Reyna's throat tightened. The phrase hit her like a memory long buried. Phantom wind. Her grandfather's method. The Kraken unit's secret. Only a handful of people had ever known it, and one of them was watching now. 2 hours later, the SEALs returned to base. They moved like men who had seen death and slipped past it by the narrowest of margins. Their steps were heavier, their faces darker. Dust clung to their uniforms, streaked with sweat and smoke. They didn't speak much as they crossed the tarmac, just exchanged glances, nods, silent acknowledgments that they were still breathing, still together. But their silence wasn't relief. It was awe. Someone had saved them, and no one knew who. Inside the command center, Master Chief Peterson walked straight through the doors, helmet tucked under one arm, jaw set like granite. His eyes swept the room with the calm precision of a man who had led teams into fire more times than anyone could count. He wasn't rattled often, but tonight, something gnawed at him. "Colonel Hayes," he said, his deep voice cutting through the low hum of radios. "I need to know who the hell provided sniper support during our operation." Colonel Hayes looked up from his desk. He was a square-shouldered man, his uniform pressed crisp, his expression controlled. But Peterson's words made him stiffen ever so slightly. "Master Chief," Hayes replied, his tone even, "according to our mission logs, no sniper support was authorized for your team." Peterson's gaze hardened. He stepped closer, the air in the room tightening with his presence. "Then we have a problem, Colonel, because someone saved my men today. 3 targets, distances between 800 and 1400 meters, with shifting crosswinds, neutralized in perfect sequence to open our escape route." He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "That wasn't luck. That was precision of the highest order." A hush fell across the command center. Radio operators slowed their work, ears tilting toward the conversation. Colonel Hayes frowned. "Our nearest sniper team was 40 kilometers out, on another assignment. Impossible." "Impossible," Peterson repeated softly. His eyes swept the room, sharp as a hawk's. And then they stopped. On Reyna. She was sitting quietly at a corner desk, her headset resting around her neck, fingers moving across a logbook as if nothing unusual had happened. Her posture was calm, deliberate, but her eyes, dark and steady, flicked up to meet Peterson's for the briefest of moments. Peterson's lips pressed into a thin line. He knew. "Vasquez," he said. His voice was level, but it carried the weight of command. "Step forward." Every head in the room turned. Reyna stood slowly, placing her pen down with care. She walked toward Peterson, her boots clicking softly against the floor, her face unreadable. Peterson stopped 2 feet from her. For a long moment he simply studied her face, as though searching for a ghost in living flesh. "Take off your sunglasses," he said quietly. "I'm not wearing sunglasses, Master Chief," Reyna replied, her tone steady. "Then show me your necklace." Her breath caught just for an instant. She hesitated. Then slowly she reached beneath her shirt and pulled out the small chain she always wore. A simple bullet casing hung from it, polished smooth with time. Inside the casing, folded tight, was a strip of paper, her grandfather's formula for 3-layer wind calculations. Peterson's eyes widened. He reached into his own pocket and pulled out a weathered slip of paper. Carefully, he unfolded it. The handwriting was feminine, neat, precise. "This," Peterson said, holding it up, "was given to me 6 years ago in Fallujah. A sniper taught me this technique, said it could save my life one day." His eyes locked on Reyna. "Today it did." The formula was signed Arvai, Kraken 7. The room was silent. Everyone present knew the whispers about the Kraken unit, the classified stories, the impossible feats attributed to an anonymous sniper team whose records had been buried under layers of secrecy. Peterson's voice dropped. "Your initials are RV, aren't they, Vasquez?" Reyna's jaw tightened. She said nothing, but her silence was louder than words. Colonel Hayes stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "Master Chief, what exactly are you suggesting?" Peterson never took his eyes off Reyna. His voice was calm, but carried the gravity of revelation. "I'm suggesting we've had one of the most elite snipers in modern military history sitting at a radio desk." The air in the room shifted. Even the operators, trained to ignore distractions, couldn't help but stare. Reyna lowered her gaze, her composure cracking at last. Her voice came quiet but firm. "That unit doesn't exist anymore." "But you do," Peterson countered gently. His words struck her harder than the recoil of her rifle. "Reyna Vasquez," he said. "Kraken 7, the ghost of Cora Pass, the sniper who saved Echo Team in 2019. A younger SEAL in the room, Thompson, blinked in shock. "Wait, Cora Pass? That was 12 insurgents taken down in under 4 minutes. They never found the shooter, and intel said it was impossible. No firing position could have had that angle." Peterson's eyes never wavered. They didn't find a position, he said, because she didn't stay in one. She moved between three, using the terrain for cover. No doctrine allows for that, but she did it. Raina finally lifted her head. Her eyes were sharp, but there was pain behind them too. I was 22, she said quietly. Green. My team leader was down. 8 SEALs trapped. I couldn't let them die. The room was silent. Colonel Hayes' voice was low. Your service record lists you as reconnaissance support, no mention of sniper qualification. Because Kraken was dissolved, Raina said flatly. Politics, oversight, fear of our methods. Our records were sealed. We were scattered to conventional roles. Peterson nodded grimly. I heard the rumors. Budget cuts. Congressional hearings. Too much lethality for the politicians' taste. So they disbanded the most effective sniper unit in military history. He looked at her again, his voice lowering to something almost reverent. And all this time, you've been right here, hiding in plain sight. Raina's eyes glistened faintly, though her face remained hard. I didn't join the military for recognition, she said. I joined to save lives. Today I saved 8. That's enough. For a heartbeat, the command center was utterly still. Then Thompson stepped forward, his voice rough with conviction. Ma'am, with respect, it's not enough for us. We owe you everything. Peterson's jaw tightened. He pulled out his satellite phone, pressing it firmly into his palm. Colonel, I'm calling this up the chain. This woman should be training the next generation of snipers, not filing radio logs. Hayes raised a hand. Master Chief, her records are sealed. I don't have authority. Then find someone who does, Peterson snapped, his voice edged with steel. Because what happened today proves something. Equipment fails. Comms go down. Weather changes. But skill, real skill, that lasts forever. Raina shook her head slowly, her voice heavy. It's too late for all that. I made peace with being forgotten. Thompson's voice rose, almost pleading. But we didn't. Half the special operations community still tells stories about the ghost sniper. You're a legend. Legends don't exist, Raina said quietly. Just people doing what needs to be done. Peterson smiled faintly, the first time his face had softened since returning. That's exactly what a legend would say. Weeks passed. On paper, nothing had changed. Raina Vasquez was still officially listed as reconnaissance support. She still signed her name on daily duty rosters beside mundane tasks. Radio watch, equipment maintenance, weather logging. Colonel Hayes' calls up the chain of command had gone nowhere. The machine of bureaucracy turned slowly, and Kraken unit remained sealed in classified files buried under politics. But within the base, everything was different. It began with a knock on her door one evening after chow. She opened it to find Thompson, the young SEAL who had spoken up for her in the command center, standing there shifting nervously on his boots. Ma'am, he said, his voice tentative, I was wondering, would you be willing to teach me that wind calculation technique? The one you used out there? Raina studied him for a long moment, searching his eyes. She saw no bravado, no arrogance, just the earnest hunger of a soldier who wanted to learn. It's not something you master in one lesson, she said. I've got time, Thompson replied simply. So she agreed. They met the next morning, just before dawn, at the firing range on the edge of the base. The sky was still streaked with pale silver, the air cool and restless. Raina stood beside him with her notebook and her grandfather's coin in hand. Forget your gadgets for now, she told him. Technology fails. Batteries die. Computers crash. But the wind, she flipped the coin, letting it twist and spin before it hit the dirt. The wind is always honest. It will tell you everything if you learn to listen. Thompson leaned forward, watching carefully as she explained. She pointed to the subtle rise of dust at their feet, the way the morning breeze shifted as the sun warmed the earth, the way clouds drifted and stretched high above. She showed him how to feel the changes on his skin, how to see the invisible paths the air carved through the world. And then, finally, she had him fire. His first shot missed, of course, but when she handed him the coin, told him to trust what it revealed, his second shot struck truer. Word spread quietly. By the end of the week, 5 more SEALs were joining them at dawn. By the end of the month, a few Rangers had slipped over from the neighboring base. Not long after, 2 Marine snipers arrived, saying they'd heard whispers of a professor teaching old techniques in the gray light of morning. Raina never advertised. She never demanded. She simply showed up every morning at 5:30, notebook in hand, coin in pocket, and shared what she knew. The students listened. They watched. They learned. Her methods were old-fashioned, almost primitive compared to the sleek devices they carried into battle. But slowly they began to see the difference. They learned how to read thermal currents by watching dust swirl near their boots, how to predict a shift in air by studying the flight of a bird, how terrain carved invisible rivers in the sky. Most importantly, she taught them patience. A good shot comes from good preparation, she said, her voice quiet but commanding. But a perfect shot comes from waiting for the perfect moment. The men absorbed her words, practiced her drills, flipped her coin through the air until its spin became second nature. Their marksmanship improved, not just on paper targets, but in their confidence. They carried themselves differently, steadier, calmer, sharper. Master Chief Peterson noticed. During a training exercise, he pulled Thompson aside. "What's different about your shooting lately?" Thompson hesitated, eyes flicking away. "Just been practicing more, Master Chief." Peterson gave him a knowing look, but didn't press. He already knew. He'd seen this level of change before. Years ago, when a certain ghost sniper had taught him a formula in the dust of Fallujah. That evening, Peterson joined one of the dawn sessions. He didn't announce himself, just stood in the shadows and watched as Raina worked with 6 different shooters. He watched how they leaned forward at her words, how they flipped the coin, how they adjusted with confidence that hadn't been there weeks earlier. When the session ended, Peterson approached her. "You know they're calling you the professor now?" he said with a faint smile. Raina gave a soft laugh. "Better than what they used to call me." "What's that?" "Radio girl." Peterson chuckled, then grew serious. "These men you're training, they're going to carry these skills into combat. Some of them will save lives because of what you're teaching them." "That's the idea," she said simply. "But you're still not getting recognition. Not getting the assignment you deserve." Raina shook her head. "Recognition is nice, but impact is better. 6 months from now, one of these men might be pinned down, air support delayed, equipment failing. He'll remember what he learned here. He'll make the impossible shot. That's enough." Peterson studied her a long moment. "And he'll probably never know your name." "Good," Raina replied. "The best teachers are the ones their students forget to credit, because by then, the knowledge has become part of who they are." The weeks rolled on. More soldiers came quietly to her sessions. The professor's lessons spread like ripples through the ranks. And though her name never appeared in official reports, her influence began to echo across the battlefield in ways no metal could measure. One evening, Peterson walked with her past the weather station. On one of the wooden posts, words had been carved by a knife. "Air support comes from above, but sometimes salvation comes from places you never thought to look." Peterson raised an eyebrow. "Did you carve that?" Raina's lips curled faintly. "Must have been one of the students." But Peterson recognized her handwriting. He said nothing. Some legends, he realized, preferred to remain anonymous. Raina Vasquez's story wasn't written in official reports. Her name didn't make the headlines. Her records remained buried in secrecy. But in the quiet dawn hours on a firing line, where the wind shifted unseen, men learned skills that would one day keep them alive. They learned patience, precision, humility. They learned to trust the air itself. And though they might never know her full story, they carried pieces of her with them, into the dust, into the gunfire, into the moments when lives hung by a thread. Because real heroes don't always stand in the spotlight. They don't always wear the medals or sit at the head of the table. Sometimes they're the ones who prepare in silence, act with precision, and then fade quietly back into the shadows. Sometimes the best air support doesn't come from above. Sometimes it comes from the ghost watching over you, coin in hand, reading the wind.